I get it. I understand, but I'm trying to get it within the next 6 months, and if it works out and you're around, it'd be great if you could be with us. Man, I was surprised. I was dying to be back with those guys and was crushed when I had to stay behind at NBC. The fact that Howard was working to get me back made me feel pretty good. The day of his first show, this was back when he was on in the afternoons, it felt like my floor of NBC shut down. We weren't supposed to be listening to him, but as soon as he came on the air, every office door closed. I had my radio on, and it hurt not being there. A lot. Then at the first break, my phone rang. Hello, is Gary there? It was a nasal, high-pitched voice. I didn't recognize it at all. This is Gary, I answered. Gary, it's me, Howard. I was shocked. He was in the middle of his first break on his first show, and he was calling me, using a really bad voice in case I didn't answer my phone. Listen, he continued, I got a spot for you. It won't take 6 months. I can get you in here tomorrow. Can you do it? I was there early. I knew I'd found a home. Every kid needs his guys, the group he bonds with. These are the guys who do as much to keep him out of jail and teach him how to behave as his parents. These are the ones who 30 years later he can sit in a room with and rip about personality tics only they understand. For me, my guys were Vinny, Frank, Steve, and Paul, who I finally found toward the end of 9th grade. Now stick with me, because this may get confusing. Vinny was a co-captain of the wrestling team with me. He and I became buddies toward the end of that 9th grade season. Paul was on the wrestling team too, and he hung with us every once in a while. Steve was the one guy I stayed tight with from playing football, who also happened to wrestle. And Frank was with Vinny. Frank looked like a man when he was 15, bigger than everybody in 9th grade and a year older. He was the only kid I knew who wore nice slacks and dress shoes to school every day. But that's because he had gone to Catholic school, and he never dropped the dress code, even after he was kicked out for fist-fighting with a nun. In fact, that may have been the reason I liked him at first. I had had bad experiences with nuns. When I was preparing for First Communion, the class was held in the basement of the church. Girls on one side, boys on the other. The nuns told us to come up one at a time through the aisle, pick out a carnation and pin, and fasten it to the lapels of our blue suits. I did as I was told, and when I got back to my seat, I was about to sit down. John Hackett, who was sitting behind me and was a real troublemaker, stuck his pin under my ass. I jumped up and yelled, "Whoa!" Without asking what happened, a nun named Sister Barbara, we called her Sister Boogie because her finger was always knuckle-deep in her nose, pointed at me and told me to come to the front of the room. When I did, she grabbed me close by the lapels and then hit me on the side of the head with her open palms 10 times over both ears. My ears were literally ringing. Then we had to go to communion services. I was crying so hard my mom thought it was an emotional experience for me, as though I had found God and my calling. Not so. I was just sad and angry. So I could appreciate Frank's disdain for organized religion. Vinny and Frank hung out a lot. Then Vinny brought in me and Paul. Then I brought in Steve. Except for Steve, we were all Italian, and unlike the guys at Uniondale Park, they wanted to do things and go places. I felt a real bond with them. People were actually afraid of Frank when he first came to school. It might have been because he knocked the wind out of a nun, or because he was so big he just commanded respect. But as people got to know him, they realized he wasn't really aggressive at all. He had his own car, a beige Pontiac Bonneville, that looked like a tank, and had a back seat the size of a queen-size bed. At parties, people asked him for the keys to his car so they could hook up in the back seat. Vinny was like me. He was short and built and really Italian-looking. He had an older brother and was really into music. Since Frank didn't care about music at all, Vinny and I used to trade off sitting in the front seat of the Bonneville, screwing with the radio, popping 8 tracks in the deck. Vinny would borrow some freaky jazz fusion from his brother that we liked to listen to. Steve was like our Tom Hagen from The Godfather. He was blonde and Irish, and he'd come from Catholic school too, only he left the right way, not like Frank. He was quiet, and really he was the good-looking one of the bunch. His house was completely different than mine in that no one talked back to adults and no one yelled at one another in front of guests. Years later, Steve was always my plus one whenever I went to Cleveland or Buffalo for an appearance at a mattress store opening or a strip club. Paul was the baby of the group. He was the youngest of all of us, last to drive, last to drink, and his family was full of overachievers. His brother was a lacrosse star, his sister was super popular, and his mom was president of the school board. That summer between 9th and 10th grade was when it all came together. We really grew tight. Vinny's family owned a cabin in upstate New York, and one day he said, "Let's just go." It took a week of phone calls between all of our parents to let a group of teenagers go up there alone for a couple of days. But all the moms got along really well, and mostly they loved Frank, just like the rest of us. Even they knew how trustworthy he was. If he was going, I could go. So the three of us, me, Vinny, and Frank, headed upstate. The name of the town was Halkett Corners. It had 2 main streets and a blinking red light at the 4 corners. We went right up after the school year ended. On the front window of the hardware store, there was a sign that read, "Congratulations to the graduating class of Halka Corners." And there were 22 pictures in the window. That was it, the entire senior class. My senior class was the smallest in the history of Uniondale High School, and it had more than 600 kids. Our first night, we decided to go out, and Vinny, who was always the instigator of stupid shit, saw a supermarket on one of the corners. There was a watermelon stand by the front door, and Vinny decided it would be fun to steal one. Then he decided it would be fun to steal another. So now we had 2 watermelons in the back of Frank's tank, and we're driving back to Vinny's parents' cabin. We saw a bunch of locals hanging out on the side of the road about our age and drinking. It was like a scene from the movie Slackers. Bright idea. Vinny said to Frank, "Speed up." Frank did, and as we passed them, Vinny threw a watermelon out the window. It splattered at the feet of these kids. We were laughing so hard. Vinny said to Frank, "Turn around." Frank did, and we passed them again. Vinny hit them with the second watermelon. Bad idea. This time, everyone got in their car and started chasing us. We were speeding down a 1-lane road, careening to the side because the kids behind us were throwing beer bottles that exploded against the Bonneville. There were more of them than us, and they were pissed. If they caught us, they'd beat the crap out of us. Frank was a really good driver, but as big as he is, he was panicking. So he pulled off the road onto a tiny dirt trail that led into the woods. Then he turned off the lights. Now we were driving blind. We couldn't see shit. After driving for several minutes, I looked back and I was sure no one was following us. Or the other cars were driving with their lights off too, in which case they were just as stupid as we were. We stopped the car and it was eerily silent, except for the sound of our heavy breathing. One of us said, "Oh my God, how dumb are we?" No one answered. We were just trying to figure out how to get out of there. We snaked our way through the woods on this dirt road until we found another highway. It was on the other side of the mountain from where the house was. It took us more than an hour to get home. We were the 3 biggest dumbasses ever. Of course, if I'd have been with the guys from the park, they would have said, "Let's turn around and get them." So our response was actually an improvement. Instead, we spent the rest of the weekend drinking beer and shooting at the bottles with a .22 caliber rifle. A couple of times, we just shot at the fins on the Bonneville, left a lot of holes. Those were real stand-by-me moments. There weren't any girls wrecking everything yet. We were just 3 guys being assholes who knew we could count on each other forever.
And now more conversation with the Booey.
Hey, Frank, it's Gary. What do you remember about meeting me for the first time? What's your first recollection of me when we were in middle school?
Yeah, I think I met you through Dino. I met you through Dino Messina.
Right.